We could take the story in today's gospel, often referred to as the cleansing of the temple, in a number of directions. We could question Jesus' anger, as many have done. We could look at the story as part of the sequence of events which leads up to Jesus' crucifixion, the increasing hostility of the Jewish authorities towards him as he continues to challenge their focus on outward practice over inward focus and attention. But I'm going to invite you to see the temple and its marketplace and Jesus' actions there as a metaphor for us and the call on us to align our lives with the gospel. By clearing the temple of its traders and money changers, Jesus is pointing the Jewish authorities back to the true purpose of the temple, the worship of God. That's our true purpose too, to worship God by aligning our hearts and our lives with the gospel. Which leads to the question, what is it that we need to drive out? What is it that needs to change? What or who is diverting our focus from living the gospel in the way the marketplace practices at the temple diverted the Jews' attention from the worship of God? What is causing our misalignment? Probably we're a bit like the Jewish authorities. We think we're doing things the right way. We've got no intention of living contrary to the gospel. We'd never knowingly cause hurt. The Jewish authorities allowed the temple to be taken over by money changers and trading for what likely appeared good reason to them. Practicalities took over. People coming to sacrifices at Passover had to pay temple taxes, and they had to do that in temple coinage, so the money changers were needed. Animals offered as sacrifices had to be unblemished, so being able to buy animals at the temple, rather than bringing them from afar with all the knocks and bruises of the journey, was necessary. All this was in service of the temple, but it was also diverting from the main purpose of the temple, the worship of God. And because it was carried out right in the temple precinct, it was defiling the temple. This gospel reading also casts light on the way appearances can be deceiving. The temple appeared to be devoted to worshipping God, but its actual practices were askew. Lots of show, but not enough heart for the important things. And we can be like this. We can be all for show, all cowboy hat but no cattle. We can be taken over, diverted, gradually pulled away. On the IT program I've been working on over the last year, people sometimes talk about our true north, the core thing we're building, the thing our attention should be focused on. So we don't get distracted, taken over by the nice to haves, the fluff, or by the complexity, and there's plenty of that. If we keep our eyes on our true north, it's easier to see what's important and keep things on track. Living the gospel way is like that, keeping our eyes on true north, bringing ourselves back time and again to the gospel. In throwing out the traders, Jesus was focusing on true north, the core of the temple's purpose, and he saw the animals and the traders as distractions. He challenged the Jewish authorities, called them to attention, shone a light on what they were doing, and asked them to realign. He pointed out that the temple was not what it was meant to be. It was not fulfilling its purpose, and his clarity was dazzling. The call is for us to have the same focus and clarity, to discern and live in alignment with what is at the heart of the gospel. What and who does it call us to be? What does it mean for us as individuals and for our world that we are committed to living gospel lives? For us as individuals, our ideas about ourselves, our conceits, the way we present ourselves in the world are not important. What's important is how we're aligned with the gospel internally, how deeply it penetrates, and how that penetration flows from us out into our lives in the world. This gospel reading issues us with the same challenge Jesus issued to the Jewish authorities: to be clear about how our lives align with the gospel. To follow the gospel, we must constantly challenge ourselves, re-examine our lives and our directions, be fierce with ourselves in the same way Jesus was fierce at the temple. It's not about castigating ourselves for our shortcomings, driving ourselves into the ground for our failings. It's about being aware, sometimes nudging, sometimes pushing ourselves forward, growing, working towards the fulfillment of our purpose. And if the change we call for in ourselves drives deep, we will feel our centres of gravity shift in the way the Jewish authorities must have felt their centres of gravity shift. And I think it's inevitable that as our own personal centres of gravity shift, we will be driven to bring about change in the world. Jesus' anger may not just have been about the practices in the temple precinct, but about the whole system. So we can hear this gospel as calling not just for change in us as individuals, but for changes in our communities, in our world. In Jesus' rage, how does that fit in? In driving out the animals and money changers, Jesus was pointing out in a very potent way that things needed to change. The temple, the Jewish authorities were on the wrong road. Jesus was pointing them back in the right direction. If we think of the title often given to this reading, the cleansing of the temple, the change Jesus sought was cleansing in the sense of putting things back on course. And sometimes, to achieve realignment or cleansing, rage is needed. It's a catalyst. It allows something new to grow by sweeping aside what stands in the way of change. Lent is often marked by giving up something, an echoing of Jesus' sacrifice by sacrificing something in our lives. Maybe we could think of the giving up in terms of cleansing, putting things back on course, change, realignment, a pushing aside of the things that divert us from living fully in alignment with the gospel. It might be characterized by trading pride for humility and a willingness to change, to live more fully, more purposefully, and in greater alignment with our true north. In John's Gospel, Jesus' cleansing of the temple sets the stage for everything that follows. It doesn't come at the end of Jesus' ministry as the final straw that leads to his arrest, crucifixion, and death, as it does in the other three Gospels. In John's telling, Jesus is pointing to a new way of relating to God. He's suggesting that animal sacrifices might not be necessary, that maybe God is a God of extravagant love and generous grace, as well as pointing forward to the sacrifice he himself will make. And for us, making sure we've got our focus right will set the stage for everything in our lives. And the great thing is that our willingness to check our focus and alignment, our willingness to change, holds within it hope. Hope that as individuals we will live fully, we will grow into ourselves, and know more and more of the expansiveness of God's love and compassion, and experience the excitement and inspiration that knowledge brings, and the hope that the world will know this reality too. Kate spoke last week about Jesus' way of opening for the full life of the Creator to flow, resisting and naming behaviours and systems that block, divert, and prevent such flow, and allowing justice to flourish. This is what we see Jesus modelling in this reading. The traders at the temple were preventing the full life of God from flowing, and so Jesus sweeps them aside. His actions open the possibility that the temple might be restored to its true focus. As we seek to realign and seek to maintain our focus on living the gospel, we must do this work with compassion for ourselves and others, knowing that as we do it, we are held in God's love, wrapped in compassion, and that we hold within us that hope of goodness, brightness, beauty, and aliveness that Jesus manifested at the temple, knowing that we are the embodiment of our God who is loving, healing, and reconciling. Amen.